A human soldier was assigned an alien girl to protect after the Galactic War. The explosion threw Danny Carter against the wall hard enough to crack his ribs. He tasted copper and dust as the building shook again. 3 months after the treaty was signed, and someone still wanted the war to continue. His earpiece crackled with static before his commander's voice cut through. "Get to the safe house now. Your assignment just became critical." Danny pushed himself up, ignoring the pain that shot through his chest. He had 20 minutes to cross a city that wanted him dead. The streets of Nexar Prime were supposed to be neutral ground, but the smoke rising from the embassy district told a different story. He moved through the rubble, his rifle ready, eyes scanning every shadow. The safe house was a reinforced bunker beneath an abandoned medical facility. Danny descended 3 flights of stairs, each step sending fresh pain through his torso. 2 guards stood at the entrance, both human, both looking as tired as he felt. They let him through without a word. Inside, Director Hayes waited with a girl who couldn't have been more than 16 in human years. She was Valorian, one of the species that had fought alongside Earth during the final battles. Her skin had the characteristic pale blue tint, and her silver eyes tracked Danny's every movement with obvious fear. "This is Kira," the director said. Her father was Commander Thel. He was killed yesterday. Danny felt his stomach drop. Commander Thel had been the highest-ranking Valorian officer who supported the peace treaty. His assassination meant the fragile alliance was falling apart faster than anyone anticipated. "She needs protection until we can get her off-world," Hayes continued. "Every faction with an axe to grind knows that capturing or killing her sends a message. You're taking her to the extraction point at the northern spaceport. 72 hours. Danny looked at the girl again. She was trying hard not to show her terror, but her hands shook. He'd been a soldier for 8 years, fought in battles that turned entire planets into graveyards, but babysitting a scared kid through a war zone felt impossible. "I need weapons, supplies, and a route that isn't compromised," Danny said. "You'll have basic supplies. As for the route," Hayes pulled up a holographic map. "Everything is compromised. The northern district is controlled by human extremists who think we surrendered too easily. The eastern corridor belongs to the Krath Supremacy, who wants to restart the war. The western sector is bombed to hell. You'll have to improvise." Kira spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can fight." Danny met her eyes. "I'm sure you can, but my job is to make sure you don't have to." Hayes handed Danny a sealed case. Transit papers, emergency credits, and a comm device that connects directly to Fleet Command. Don't use it unless you absolutely have no choice. Every transmission gets traced. The building shook again, closer this time. Hayes moved toward the exit. "You leave in 10 minutes. There's a transport waiting in the underground garage. It'll get you to the edge of the city. After that, you're on foot." When Hayes left, Danny opened the case and distributed the supplies. Kira watched him with those unsettling silver eyes. He wondered what she saw when she looked at him. A protector? A reminder that her father was dead? Just another soldier in a war that had taken too much from everyone? "Can I ask you something?" Kira said. "Sure. Why did you agree to this?" Danny checked his rifle, making sure the charge pack was full. "Because if we can't protect the ones who trusted us enough to make peace, then we don't deserve that peace." The girl nodded slowly, and Danny saw something shift in her expression. Determination, maybe? Or just acceptance of what came next. They moved to the garage where a battered transport vehicle waited. Danny helped Kira inside, then climbed into the driver's seat. The engine hummed to life, and he guided them into the tunnel that led toward the city's northern edge. Behind them, another explosion lit up the sky. The war was supposed to be over, but nobody had told the people who were still fighting. Danny drove fast, weaving through debris and abandoned vehicles. Kira stayed silent beside him, her hands gripped tight in her lap. The tunnel ended at a checkpoint that should have been manned by peacekeeping forces. Instead, it was empty except for 3 bodies in UN uniforms. "We're walking from here," Danny said. They abandoned the transport and moved into the ruins of what had once been a residential district. The buildings were hollow shells, their windows dark and empty. Danny kept Kira close, his weapon ready. Every sound made him tense. Every shadow could hide a threat. 3 blocks in, Danny heard movement ahead. He pulled Kira into a doorway and raised his rifle. 6 figures emerged from the smoke, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that were definitely not regulation. Raiders, the kind of desperate people who appeared in every war's aftermath. The raiders hadn't seen them yet. Danny gestured for Kira to stay low and quiet. They needed to let these men pass and continue north. But one of the raiders stopped, sniffing the air. Danny's blood ran cold. The raider was Krath, and the Krath had enhanced senses. The alien's head turned toward their hiding spot, and his eyes widened in recognition. He shouted something in his native language, and the other raiders spun toward them. "Run," Danny said. They burst from cover as the first energy bolt scorched the wall beside Danny's head. He returned fire, dropping one raider, then grabbed Kira's arm and pulled her into a narrow alley. Behind them, the raiders gave chase, their footsteps pounding on broken concrete. Danny's ribs screamed with every breath, but he pushed harder, dragging Kira through turns and over obstacles. They emerged into an open square, and Danny's heart sank. Dead end. The buildings on all sides were too damaged to enter, and the raiders were seconds behind them. He turned to face their pursuers, putting himself between Kira and the approaching threat. 5 raiders left, all armed, all angry. Danny raised his rifle, knowing he couldn't take them all before they overwhelmed him. Then Kira stepped beside him, her hands glowing with a pale blue light. Danny had heard about Valorian abilities, but had never seen them up close. The air around her shimmered, and when the raiders fired, their shots curved away, deflected by some kind of energy field. "Get down," she said, and Danny dropped. The light from Kira's hands exploded outward in a shockwave that sent the raiders flying. They hit the ground hard and didn't move. Kira swayed, and Danny caught her before she fell. "You said you could fight," Danny said, trying to keep his voice light despite the situation. Kira managed a weak smile. "I may have understated my abilities." Danny looked at the unconscious raiders, then back at the girl he was supposed to protect. This mission just got a lot more complicated. He helped Kira to her feet, and together they disappeared into the ruins, heading north toward an extraction point that suddenly felt very far away. The northern district smelled like burnt metal and death. Danny guided Kira through streets that had been beautiful once, before the war turned them into mass graves. They'd been moving for 6 hours, stopping only when Kira needed to rest. The girl was tougher than she looked, but using her abilities had drained her. They found shelter in what remained of a school, the kind of place that made Danny's chest tight with memories he tried not to think about. Kira sat against a wall covered in children's drawings, faded now and torn. "How much further?" she asked. "Another 30 miles, maybe more, depending on what we run into." Danny checked his supplies. They had food for 3 days if they rationed carefully, water for 2. The extraction wasn't for another 60 hours. It was going to be tight. "Tell me about Earth," Kira said suddenly. Danny looked at her, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. I've never been there. My father said it was beautiful." Danny sat down across from her, his rifle across his knees. "It is. Or it was, before the war. I'm from a place called Colorado. Mountains so high they touch the clouds, forests that go on forever. Cold in the winter, perfect in the summer." Kira closed her eyes as if trying to picture it. "My world was beautiful too. Valoria had 3 moons, and when they were all full, the night was almost as bright as day. We had oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. My father used to take me sailing." Past tense, Danny noticed. What happened to it? "The Krath bombardment in the 3rd year of the war. The planet survived, but it's not the same. Most of the population evacuated. Those who stayed are trying to rebuild, but some damage can't be fixed." Danny understood that feeling. Earth had been lucky, relatively speaking. The fighting had mostly happened in space or on colony worlds, but he'd been to those colonies, seen what war did to places that couldn't defend themselves. "Your father was a good man," Danny said. "I never met him, but everyone in the fleet knew his name. He saved a lot of lives when he convinced the Valorian Council to join our side." Kira opened her eyes, and Danny saw tears threatening to fall. "He died because he believed in peace. Because he thought humans and Valorians could build something better than endless war, and now people like those raiders want to destroy everything he worked for." "They won't," Danny said firmly. "We're going to get you to safety, and you're going to make sure your father's vision becomes reality. That's how we honor him." Kira wiped her eyes and nodded. "Thank you, Danny." They rested for 2 hours, taking turns on watch. Danny used the time to plan their route markings, safe zones, and danger areas on his mental map. The northern spaceport was heavily fortified, which meant getting close would be nearly impossible without the right credentials. Their transit papers might work, or they might get them both killed. When Kira woke, Danny shared his concerns. The girl listened carefully, then surprised him with her response. "There's another way," she said. "The old maintenance tunnels. They were built when the city was first established, before the war. They run under most of the major districts, including the spaceport." Danny frowned. "If those tunnels exist, why aren't they on any of the maps I was given?" "Because they were sealed during the war. Too many security risks. But I know where the entrances are. My father showed me when we first arrived on Nexar Prime. He said it was important to always have an escape route. Smart man." Can you get us to an entrance? Kira nodded. There's one about 5 miles from here, in the old industrial sector. It'll be dangerous. That area is controlled by the human extremists. Danny stood and offered Kira his hand. Then we better move carefully. They left the school as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ruined streets. The industrial sector was a maze of factories and warehouses, most of them destroyed during the war's final battles. Danny moved cautiously, using the shadows for cover, keeping Kira close behind him. They were halfway to their destination when Danny heard voices ahead. He signaled for Kira to stop and crept forward to investigate. A group of armed men had set up a checkpoint at an intersection. They wore no uniforms, but their weapons were military grade. Human extremists, just as Kira had warned. Danny counted 8 men, all positioned to control the intersection. Going around would add hours to their journey, time they didn't have. He was considering their options when one of the men shouted, "Movement north side." Danny's heart sank as he realized they'd been spotted. He grabbed Kira and pulled her into a nearby warehouse as gunfire erupted behind them. The building was vast and dark, filled with rusted machinery and empty crates. Hearing the extremists entering behind them. "Split up," someone ordered. "Find them." Danny pulled Kira behind a massive machine press. They were trapped, outnumbered, and running out of options. The extremists were spreading through the warehouse, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. "I can handle them," Kira whispered, her hands beginning to glow again. "No," Danny said quietly. "You're still recovering from earlier. Using your abilities again could put you in a coma or worse." "Then what do we do?" Danny checked his rifle's charge. "We fight smart, not hard." He picked up a metal pipe from the floor and threw it across the warehouse. It clattered loudly, and 3 of the extremists moved toward the sound. Danny waited until they passed, then silently dropped, one with a precise strike to the neck. The man fell without a sound. The second extremist turned just as Danny's knife found his throat. The third managed to shout a warning before Danny silenced him, but the damage was done. The remaining 5 extremists converged on their position. Danny pushed Kira toward a rear exit. "Go." "Find the tunnel entrance and wait for me." "I'm not leaving you," Kira said stubbornly. "You have to. If we both die here, your father's sacrifice means nothing. Go." Kira hesitated, then ran. Danny turned to face the approaching extremists, his rifle ready. The first 2 came around a corner together, and Danny dropped them both with precise shots. 3 left. The warehouse erupted with gunfire as the remaining extremists tried to pin Danny down. He moved between machines, using the industrial equipment for cover, taking shots when he could. 1 extremist fell, then another. The last one was smarter, staying hidden and waiting for Danny to make a mistake. Danny's ribs were agony now, each breath a struggle. He was running on adrenaline and determination, knowing that if he failed here, Kira would be hunted down and killed. He couldn't let that happen. The last extremist made his move, rushing Danny's position from an unexpected angle. They collided hard, and Danny's rifle went flying. They grappled, trading blows, each trying to gain the upper hand. The extremist was bigger, stronger, and Danny's injured ribs put him at a severe disadvantage. The extremist's hands found Danny's throat and squeezed. Danny's vision began to tunnel, darkness creeping in from the edges. He fumbled for his knife, found it, and drove it upward. The extremist gasped and released his grip, stumbling backward. Danny didn't give him a chance to recover. Danny retrieved his rifle and stumbled toward the rear exit, his breathing ragged. He found Kira waiting outside, her face pale with worry. "You came back," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I gave you an order, soldier," Danny said with a weak smile. "I'm not a soldier. I'm a scared girl whose father just died. I wasn't going to leave the only person trying to keep me alive." Danny wanted to argue, but he was too tired. Instead, he let Kira help him walk. She guided them through a series of narrow alleys to a heavy metal door set into the ground, the tunnel entrance. Kira pried the door open with surprising strength, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Danny went first, testing each rung carefully. The tunnel below was exactly as Kira had described, a maintenance corridor wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, providing minimal illumination. They walked for hours through the tunnels, following Kira's memory of the layout. The air was stale and smelled of rust and old machinery. Danny's ribs throbbed with every step, but he pushed through the pain. They couldn't afford to stop now. The tunnels branched multiple times, each intersection marked with faded signs in multiple languages. Kira navigated confidently, her earlier fear replaced by determination. Danny found himself impressed by her resilience. She'd lost her father, been thrown into a war zone, and was still moving forward. They were nearing the spaceport tunnels when Danny heard sounds ahead. Not footsteps exactly, but the hum of machinery and voices. He raised his rifle and moved forward cautiously. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Inside were at least 20 people, both human and alien species, all wearing the same unmarked armor. They'd stumbled into a major operation, and from the weapons and equipment Danny could see, it wasn't peacekeeping. A woman noticed them and shouted in alarm. Within seconds, Danny and Kira were surrounded by armed soldiers, their weapons trained on them. "Lower your weapon," the woman ordered. She was human, probably in her 40s, with the bearing of someone used to command. Danny kept his rifle raised. "We're just passing through." "No trouble," the woman laughed. "You're Danny Carter, the soldier assigned to protect Commander Thell's daughter. You're worth a fortune to the right buyer. Lower your weapon, or we open fire." Danny's mind raced through options. They were outnumbered 20-2, trapped in a tunnel with no cover. Kira couldn't use her abilities without risking her health. Fighting was suicide. "Why are you doing this?" Kira asked, her voice steady despite their situation. "The war is over." The woman turned her attention to Kira. "The war is over for those who benefit from peace. For those of us who lost everything, who fought and bled and watched our friends die, the war will never be over. Selling you to the crass supremacy will fund our operations for years. They want to restart the conflict, and having the daughter of the great peacemaker will give them leverage." "My father gave his life for peace," Kira said, anger creeping into her voice. "Your father betrayed everyone who died fighting the Krath. He made us allies with the enemy." Danny saw Kira's hands beginning to glow and knew she was about to do something reckless. He had to act first. He lowered his rifle slowly, as if surrendering, then dropped it completely. The woman smiled triumphantly. "That's better. Secure them both." As two soldiers moved forward to restrain them, Danny made his move. He grabbed a flashbang from his belt and threw it at the ground. The tunnel exploded with light and sound, and in the chaos, Danny grabbed Kira and ran. They sprinted back the way they'd come, gunfire erupting behind them. Danny felt a round graze his shoulder, but he didn't stop. They reached a junction and took a random turn, then another, trying to lose their pursuers in the maze of tunnels. Danny pulled Kira into a small maintenance alcove and killed his flashlight. They pressed against the wall, barely breathing, as footsteps and shouts echoed through the tunnels. The search party passed their hiding spot twice before finally moving on. "We can't use the tunnels anymore," Danny whispered. "They'll be watching every route to the spaceport." "Then how do we get there?" Kira asked. "We don't. We find another way off this planet." "There is no other way. The spaceport is the only location with ships capable of interstellar travel." Danny's mind worked through the problem. The woman had said they were worth a fortune to the right buyer. That meant there were people looking for them, which meant communication networks were active. If they could access a secure terminal, they might be able to call for help. "Do you know where the nearest communication hub is?" Danny asked. Kira thought for a moment. "There's a civilian hub about 2 miles east of here. It was damaged during the war, but some systems might still be functional, and that's where we go." They emerged from the tunnels in an abandoned residential area. The sun was rising, painting the ruins in shades of orange and red, and he led them east, moving carefully through streets that were too quiet. His shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed him, and his ribs made every breath an effort, but he kept moving. The communication hub was a 5-story building that had partially collapsed on one side. They entered through a ground-floor window, careful to avoid the unstable debris. Inside, most of the equipment was destroyed, but Kira found a terminal in a back room that still had power. "Can you access it?" Danny asked. Kira's fingers flew over the interface, her silver eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "I can get into the local network, but reaching Fleet Command requires encryption keys we don't have. What about a general distress signal? That would tell everyone where we are, including the people trying to kill us." Danny considered their options. They were running out of time, supplies, and luck. Taking the risk might be their only chance. "Do it," he said. "Send the signal and encrypt it with my military ID. Fleet Command will recognize it." Kira worked the terminal, and within minutes, a message was transmitted into the void. Now they had to hope someone friendly received it before someone hostile found them. They didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, Danny's earpiece crackled to life. "Carter, this is Captain Brooks on the UNS Defiant. We received your distress signal." "What's your situation?" Relief flooded through Danny. "Sir, I have the package. Multiple hostile forces are hunting us. The extraction point is compromised. We need immediate evac." "Copy that. We're deploying a shuttle to your location. Be advised, the landing zone will be hot. Expect resistance." "Understood. How long?" 30 minutes. Hold position and stay alive, soldier. The transmission ended, and Danny allowed himself a moment of hope. 30 minutes. They just had to survive 30 more minutes. Kira was watching him with those silver eyes. We're getting out of here? We're getting out of here, Danny confirmed. They fortified their position as best they could, barricading the entrance and finding cover near the windows. Danny checked his rifle's charge. He had maybe 50 shots left, enough for a short firefight, but not a prolonged battle. The hostile forces found them with 15 minutes to spare. Danny heard vehicles approaching and saw armed fighters taking positions around the building. The woman from the tunnels was with them, directing her soldiers like pieces on a chessboard. They know we called for help, Kira said, peering through a gap in the barricade. Then they know they have a limited time to finish this, Danny replied. Stay low and let me handle it. The attack came from multiple sides simultaneously. Windows shattered as gunfire ripped through the building. Danny returned fire carefully, making each shot count. He dropped 3 attackers before they adjusted their tactics and began advancing under covering fire. Kira's hands glowed despite Danny's protests. She created a shield that deflected incoming rounds, buying them precious seconds. But Danny could see the strain on her face, the way her whole body shook with effort. Save your strength, Danny ordered. You'll need it when the shuttle arrives. I can help now. And I need you alive later. That's an order. Kira reluctantly let the shield drop, and Danny redoubled his efforts. He moved between positions, making it seem like there were more defenders than there actually were. It was an old trick, but it bought them time. The building shook as something heavy hit the lower floors. They were trying to collapse it, to bury Danny and Kira in the rubble. Danny grabbed Kira and pulled her toward the roof access. We need higher ground, he said. They climbed through damaged floors, the building groaning around them. Hostile forces were inside now, searching floor by floor. Danny could hear them getting closer, their radio chatter coordinating the hunt. They reached the roof just as Danny's earpiece crackled again. Carter, shuttle is 2 minutes out. Get ready for extraction. Danny looked at the sky and saw the shuttle streaking toward them, its engines glowing bright. He also saw the ground forces aiming anti-aircraft weapons at it. They're going to shoot down the shuttle, Kira said, horror in her voice. Not if you stop them. Kira looked at Danny, understanding dawning. I don't know if I can. The distance is too far, and I'm already exhausted. Your father believed in you enough to show you those escape routes. He trusted you to survive. Now I need you to trust yourself. You can do this. Kira closed her eyes, gathering her strength. Her hands began to glow, brighter than before. The air around them shimmered with energy. Below, the hostile forces fired their anti-aircraft weapons. Kira screamed, and the energy exploded outward in a massive wave. The missiles detonated midair far from their target. The shockwave knocked the ground forces off their feet. The shuttle landed on the roof, its side door already open. Go, 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 the pilot shouted. Danny grabbed Kira, who was barely conscious, and ran for the shuttle. Behind them, hostile forces were recovering, returning fire. Rounds pinged off the shuttle's armor as Danny practically threw Kira inside and dove in after her. The shuttle lifted off as the building finally collapsed beneath them. Danny held Kira as they climbed toward orbit, watching the city shrink below. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd survived. Kira stirred in his arms. Did we make it? We made it, Danny confirmed. You did great. The girl smiled weakly before passing out. Danny held her carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility that went beyond just keeping her alive. She represented something important, a bridge between species, a symbol of the peace her father had died for. Captain Brooks met them when they docked with the UNS Defiant. The captain was a stern-looking man in his 50s, but his expression softened when he saw Kira. Is she all right? She will be, Danny said. She just needs rest. Medical teams took Kira to the infirmary while Brooks debriefed Danny in his ready room. Danny gave a full report, leaving nothing out. The captain listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When Danny finished, Brooks leaned back in his chair. This is worse than we thought. If there are organized groups actively working to restart the war, we need to root them out before they succeed. What happens to Kira? Danny asked. She'll be taken to a secure location, somewhere the various factions can't reach her. She'll have protection, resources, everything she needs. And me? Brooks studied Danny for a long moment. You did good work, Carter. The Admiral wants to see you when we reach the fleet. Might be a commendation in your future. With respect, sir, I don't want a medal. I want to make sure Kira stays safe. Brooks smiled slightly. I had a feeling you'd say that. Consider yourself reassigned. You're now part of her protection detail permanently, if you'll accept it. Danny thought about everything they'd been through, the fear in Kira's eyes when they first met, and the determination he'd seen later. He thought about her father's sacrifice and what it meant for the future. "I accept," he said. 3 days later, Danny stood outside Kira's quarters on the secure station where she'd been relocated. She was recovering well, the doctor said, but the emotional trauma would take longer to heal. Danny knocked gently on the door. "Come in," Kira called. Danny entered to find her sitting by a window looking out at the stars. She turned and smiled when she saw him. "They told me you're staying," she said. "Someone has to keep you out of trouble." Kira laughed, a sound Danny realized he hadn't heard before. It was good to hear. She gestured for him to sit, and they spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. Danny told her more about Earth, about the mountains and forests he missed. Kira shared memories of her father, the good times before the war. "What happens now?" Kira asked eventually. "Now we rebuild," Danny said. "We honor your father by making sure his vision of peace becomes reality. We show everyone that humans and Valorians can not only coexist, but thrive together." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It will be. But I think we're up for it." Kira looked at Danny with those silver eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "Thank you, Danny, for everything. You could have abandoned me, could have decided I wasn't worth the risk, but you didn't." Danny shook his head. "You were always worth it. Your father understood that people are more important than politics or power. He believed in building something better. The least we can do is prove him right." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, people were still fighting, still trying to drag the galaxy back into war. But here, in this moment, there was peace. It was fragile and hard-won, but it was real. Danny knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be more threats, more people who wanted Kira dead or captured, but he also knew he wasn't facing it alone. Kira was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and together they would face whatever came next. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Building peace was harder than fighting wars, required more courage and more sacrifice, but it was worth it. Danny looked at Kira and saw not just a girl to protect, but a symbol of hope for everyone who wanted something better than endless conflict. In the weeks that followed, Danny and Kira settled into their new reality. The station was home to dozens of species, all working together to build the foundations of a lasting peace. Kira attended diplomatic sessions, learning the skills she'd need to carry on her father's legacy. Danny stood guard, watching for threats, but also watching Kira grow into the leader she was meant to be. One evening, as they walked through the station's observation deck, Kira stopped suddenly. "Danny, do you think my father would be proud of me?" Danny didn't hesitate. "He'd be more than proud. He'd be amazed at how strong you've become." "I'm not strong. I'm terrified most of the time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Do you?" Kira smiled, and Danny saw in her expression a glimpse of the leader she would become. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but it was in good hands. As they continued their walk, Danny allowed himself to hope that the sacrifices hadn't been in vain, that the peace would hold, that the future would be better than the past. It was a fragile hope, but it was enough. The war was over. The real work had just begun. And Danny Carter, a soldier who'd been assigned to protect an alien girl, had found something he hadn't expected, a purpose beyond the battlefield, a reason to believe in tomorrow. Together, they would face whatever came next. Together, they would build the peace that Commander Thel had died for. Together, they would prove that even in the darkest times, hope could survive. The stars shone through the viewport, countless points of light in the darkness. Each one represented a world, a people, a potential future. Some would choose war. Some would choose peace. But Danny and Kira would be there, working tirelessly to tip the scales towards something better. The assignment had seemed simple at first, protect the girl until extraction, but it had become so much more. It had become a mission to protect not just one life, but the idea that different species could build something together, that the galaxy didn't have to tear itself apart. Danny watched Kira as she gazed at the stars, her silver eyes full of determination and hope. She was young, but she carried the weight of her father's legacy with grace. She would stumble, make mistakes, face challenges that seemed insurmountable. But she would never be alone, because Danny Carter had made a promise, not just to protect her body, but to protect her spirit, her hope, her belief in a better future. It was a promise he intended to keep for as long as he drew breath. The future was uncertain, the path ahead filled with obstacles. But for the first time since the war began, Danny felt something he'd almost forgotten: optimism. The galaxy was broken, but it could be repaired. People were wounded, but they could heal. The peace was fragile, but it could be strengthened. One girl, one soldier, one chance at something better. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. And sometimes that's all anyone needed: a start, a spark, a single moment of courage in the face of impossible odds. Danny and Kira stood together, watching the stars, and began to plan their next move. There was work to be done, peace to protect, a future to build. The war had ended, but their mission had just begun, and in the darkness of space, surrounded by the light of distant suns, two unlikely allies prepared to show the galaxy what humanity, fuck yeah, really meant. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to protect, to build, to hope. That was the real strength, the real victory, and it was a victory they would fight for every single day.